The alien queen thought she married a humble man, until she witnessed him in action. The sky above Zithuria shimmered in shades of emerald and gold, a constant reminder of the planet's alien beauty. Floating cities drifted gracefully across the horizon, tethered to the ground by invisible energy fields that pulsed with soft light. The air smelled faintly of metallic ozone mixed with sweet blossoms that grew in terraces along the cliffs. It was a world that seemed untouched by war, a place where beauty and intellect were revered above all else. Queen Lysara walked along the grand balcony of the royal palace, her multi-limbed frame moving with elegance and poise. She had ruled Zithuria for decades, guiding her people with intelligence and strategic skill that few could match. Yet today, her thoughts were not on diplomacy or statecraft, but on the strange human she had recently married. Ethan Cole stood near the balcony railing, his gaze sweeping over the floating gardens that stretched out into the distance. From the moment he arrived on Zithuria, he had been careful not to stand out. He dressed modestly, spoke politely, and smiled at the right moments, blending into a court that was filled with beings whose lives were far more complex than his own. To outsiders, he seemed like a humble man, quiet and observant, someone who would never cause trouble or draw attention to himself. But Lysara had begun to notice little things about him, subtle actions that hinted at a mind far sharper than it appeared. Today, the palace buzzed with a rare form of excitement. A festival was underway to celebrate the union between human and Zithurian, a union that many had thought impossible only a few cycles ago. The court was filled with dignitaries from distant planets, each wearing intricate garments that shimmered like starlight. Lysara had arranged everything meticulously, as she always did, but Ethan had insisted on small, human touches. A bouquet of flowers from Earth, candles that flickered like fire rather than light crystals, and music that carried a rhythm unfamiliar to Zithurians but strangely comforting. She had initially questioned these choices, but as the festival began, she realized they brought a warmth to the celebration that even her carefully planned arrangements could not. Ethan moved through the crowd with quiet grace, greeting diplomats and nobles with a gentle nod or a soft word. His presence was calming. He had a way of making others feel seen without trying too hard. Lysara watched him, noting the way people unconsciously straightened when he approached, and the way their conversation seemed to pause, as if his attention carried weight without demand. She had expected him to be awkward, perhaps overwhelmed by the grandeur of her world, but he had adapted in ways she had not anticipated. As the day progressed, Lysara and Ethan wandered through the floating gardens, a rare moment alone amid the grandeur. The terraces were alive with exotic flowers, their petals glowing faintly under Zithuria's twin suns. Tiny creatures with translucent wings darted among the plants, leaving trails of sparkling dust in their wake. Ethan knelt to examine a flower unfamiliar to him, touching its delicate petals with reverence. "It's amazing," he said softly. "It reminds me of the orchids on Earth, but somehow wiser." Ethan's fascination with the smallest details was both human and extraordinary. He looked up at her with a calm intensity. "I suppose I do. The world is full of things we don't understand, and when you see something new, it's better to be amazed than to be indifferent." They were fragile in many ways, yet capable of incredible insight and courage. She had read of their history, their wars and innovations, but seeing one in person was different. Ethan was not only a representative of his species, he was a reflection of what humanity could be at its best, curious, brave, and compassionate. Their conversation was interrupted by a small commotion near the lower terraces. A group of young Zithurians had become trapped on a floating platform when its energy field faltered. Panic began to ripple through the crowd. Lysara felt her heart tighten. Such accidents were rare but not impossible. She was about to issue orders when Ethan stepped forward calmly, moving toward the platform with a confidence that caught her off guard. He spoke softly to the children, reassuring them in a language they could understand. Then he began instructing the attendants and guards, not with authority, but with precise clarity. Small adjustments were made to the energy field controls. Ropes and safety harnesses were used in ways Lysara had never seen, and within moments, the children were safely returned to the terrace. Not a single one was hurt. Lysara's multiple eyes widened in surprise. She had seen leaders command armies, negotiate treaties, and manipulate complex politics, but she had never seen someone handle a crisis with such quiet efficiency. Ethan had not shouted, he had not demanded obedience, yet he had solved a problem that could have ended in disaster. Later, as the festival continued, Lysara found herself observing Ethan more closely than ever before. He mingled with aliens of various species, listening intently to their stories, asking thoughtful questions, and responding with a depth that made her realize he was absorbing everything around him. The ease with which he navigated their cultures, languages, and unspoken norms was uncanny. He seemed to understand not just words but intentions, emotions, and motivations. The evening descended in hues of deep violet and rose. Lanterns floated above the terraces, casting soft light on the faces of the attendees. Music filled the air, a blend of Zethurian instruments and human strings that Ethan had suggested. Lysara felt a rare emotion well up inside her, a mixture of pride, admiration, and something more personal. This human she had married, this quiet and unassuming man, was far more extraordinary than she had ever realized. As the festival reached its climax, a distant alarm echoed across the city. It was faint, almost imperceptible to most, but Lysara recognized the subtle shift in the energy grid. Something was wrong. She turned to Ethan, expecting fear or hesitation, but found only calm determination. "Ethan," she said, her voice carrying both command and question, "do you feel that?" The Chrythons, a neighboring species known for their aggression, had long been a threat, but she had believed their next move would be months away. Yet here it was, unfolding right under her palace's floating towers. Before she could react further, Ethan moved into action. He instructed palace guards, not in harsh orders but in careful guidance. Small adjustments were made to the city's shields, communication lines were secured, and evacuation routes for civilians were quietly prepared. Lysara watched, astonished, as her husband transformed from a humble diplomat into a commander of subtle genius. The alarm grew louder as strange vessels appeared in the sky, their sleek forms cutting through the twilight. Zethurian ships readied themselves for defense, but Ethan's attention was elsewhere. He had already begun coordinating civilians, couriers, and minor officials, ensuring that the city's complex network could function even under duress. Lysara realized in that moment that she had underestimated him. All this time she had believed Ethan was simply a kind and clever man, a diplomat who could charm and negotiate. But now she saw something deeper, a mind capable of understanding systems, predicting outcomes, and taking decisive action when chaos threatened to overwhelm. He was human, yet his ability to respond calmly and intelligently to danger surpassed even her expectations. The first Chrython vessel entered the atmosphere, a shadow moving against the glowing skies. Lysara's pulse quickened, but Ethan remained steady. He moved among the guards, whispering instructions, checking shields, and directing energy flows in ways that were foreign even to the most experienced Zethurians. Small changes, imperceptible to most, began to make a difference. The city's defenses hummed in response, adjusting to the incoming threat almost instinctively. Lysara could not take her eyes off him. Every decision he made, every step he took was measured and deliberate. He did not panic. He did not shout. He acted with a combination of instinct, logic, and courage that seemed almost unreal. And as she watched, she began to feel a profound respect, tinged with awe. This was the man she had married, the humble human she had believed to be ordinary. But now she knew he was extraordinary in ways she could barely comprehend. As the Chrython vessel neared, Ethan activated a series of countermeasures, guiding Zethurian defenses with precision. Explosions lit the skies, but casualties were minimized, and the city's most vital structures remained intact. Lysara felt a sense of disbelief and pride. Her people were safe, and it was largely because of him. The night settled over Zethuria, calm once more after the brief but terrifying encounter. Citizens and officials alike were unaware of how close they had come to disaster. Lysara found Ethan on the palace balcony, looking out at the horizon as if nothing had happened. "You were incredible," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. He turned to her, smiling modestly. "I just did what I could," he replied. "It's what any human would do: adapt, survive, help when needed." They were unpredictable, resourceful, and capable of extraordinary courage. And she, the Queen of Zethuria, had married one of them. As they stood together, the floating gardens glowing softly around them, Lysara felt a mixture of relief, admiration, and curiosity. She had thought she knew Ethan. She had thought he was a humble, quiet man. But now she understood that his humility was a choice, a part of a strength far greater than she could have anticipated. The real test of his abilities, she knew, was yet to come. And when that test arrived, she would see the full measure of what humanity could achieve. The morning light on Zethuria was gentle, yet it carried a sense of urgency that could not be ignored. The twin suns rose slowly above the horizon, casting long shadows across the floating cities. Queen Lysara moved through the corridors of the palace, her multiple limbs gliding gracefully along the polished floors. Despite the beauty of her world, there was a tension in the air that even the festivals and celebrations could not hide. The Chrythons had not retreated far. Their threat hung over Zethuria like a dark cloud. Ethan Cole stood near a holographic map projected in the palace's central chamber. His fingers traced routes, adjusted shields, and highlighted enemy positions. To the Zethurian advisors around him, it appeared almost as if he were playing a delicate game of strategy, but Lysara knew better. Every movement he made was deliberate, a calculation meant to protect lives and outsmart a cunning enemy. He was still dressed modestly, his human appearance unchanged, yet there was a quiet intensity in his eyes that revealed his full attention to the crisis. "Ethan," Lysara said, her voice calm but firm, "the Chrythons will not wait. They are amassing a fleet beyond the outer sectors. I fear our defenses, while strong, may not withstand a full assault." But she had learned, in the brief time she had observed him, that Ethan's words were backed by action. She knew he had a plan, even if it was hidden beneath layers of calm demeanor. The day passed in a flurry of preparations. Ethan moved through the city with purpose, interacting with Zethurian officials and civilians alike. He spoke in quiet tones, offering guidance on how to reinforce key points, organizing supply lines, and subtly encouraging citizens to prepare for emergencies without causing panic. His approach was unlike anything Lysara had seen before. The aliens around her often relied on strict protocols and authority. Ethan relied on trust, cleverness, and inspiration. By mid-afternoon, he had begun visiting the lower sectors of the city, areas that were often overlooked but crucial in times of crisis. Factories producing energy crystals, workshops crafting defensive devices, and residential zones housing thousands of citizens were all inspected. Ethan spoke with workers, listened to their concerns, and offered solutions that seemed simple but were ingenious in their efficiency. Small adjustments to energy flows, rearrangements of defensive barriers, and minor structural reinforcements were made in ways that saved time and resources. Lysara followed him at a distance, observing silently. She was amazed by his ability to move through a world so alien to him, and yet understand it better than most Zethurians. His mind was flexible, adapting to unexpected problems with solutions that combined logic, intuition, and creativity. Where others would see obstacles, he saw opportunity. In one neighborhood, a group of young Zethurians was struggling to redirect a malfunctioning energy conduit. They had tried to fix it using standard procedures, but the conduit continued to spark dangerously. Ethan approached, crouched beside them, and began giving instructions. His hands moved quickly, connecting circuits in ways the locals had not considered. Sparks flew, but he remained calm. Within minutes, the conduit was stable, and the children's eyes widened in amazement. Lysara watched in silence, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. She had thought humans were fragile and limited, yet here was one who could navigate danger and complexity with elegance and precision. She realized that the humility she had seen in him was not weakness. It was a deliberate choice, a quiet strength that allowed him to observe, understand, and act with perfect timing. As the sun dipped lower, signaling the approach of Zithuria's night cycle, reports arrived from the outer sectors. Small Krithan scouting vessels had been detected near the planet's edge. They moved swiftly, scanning for weaknesses, testing the city's defenses. Lysara felt a flicker of tension, but Ethan remained calm. He quickly assessed the situation, coordinating with Zithurian patrols and civilian volunteers. His plan was not to confront the enemy head-on, but to guide them into predictable paths where the city's defenses would be most effective. "The Krithans believe in brute force," Ethan said quietly, almost to himself. "They don't anticipate subtlety. They don't understand humans yet." Ethan demonstrated that their greatest strength lay in their ability to adapt, to improvise, and to act decisively when faced with danger. His calmness in the face of threat was not naive. It was a reflection of deep understanding and courage. As evening fell, Ethan returned to the palace with Lysara. The city's lights glowed softly, illuminating the floating gardens and the streets below. The citizens moved with a quiet efficiency, their movements guided by the subtle influence Ethan had established throughout the day. He paused on the balcony, gazing out at the approaching darkness of space. Lysara joined him, her multiple limbs resting gracefully on the railing. "You've done more than I imagined," she said. "The city functions because of you, not just the defenses or the protocols." He did not seek glory, he sought effectiveness. He did not demand recognition, he worked quietly, letting results speak for themselves. The calm of the evening was broken by a sudden alert. Sensors detected movement in the nearby asteroid belt. Ethan quickly assessed the data. "The Krithans are testing us," he said. "They're probing defenses, trying to find weaknesses, but they are predictable. They rely on patterns and assumptions. We can use that." Small drones were repositioned to mislead the enemy. Holographic decoys were deployed to give the appearance of strength in one sector while leaving another exposed. Every move was calculated, yet executed with a subtlety that the Krithans would never detect. As the night progressed, the first enemy ships entered Zithuria's orbit. They were sleek and fast, equipped with weapons that had challenged many worlds before. But Ethan had already anticipated their approach. His strategies guided the city's defenses, ensuring that shields were reinforced at key points and evacuation protocols were ready. When the enemy fired, the attacks were deflected or absorbed with minimal damage. Civilians and soldiers alike moved with confidence, following the invisible guidance that Ethan had established. Lysara observed, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and awe. She had witnessed many battles as a queen, yet she had never seen one fought with such calm precision and effectiveness. Ethan did not rely on raw power. He relied on understanding, creativity, and quick thinking. Every decision, every instruction was designed to maximize survival while minimizing chaos. Hours passed, and the Krithans withdrew their initial assault, unable to breach the city's defenses. Sensors indicated they were regrouping for a larger attack, but the immediate danger had passed. Citizens returned to their homes, unaware of how close they had come to disaster. Lysara turned to Ethan, her multiple eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and admiration. "You were incredible," she said softly. "The city, the people, they survived because of you." "That is what humans do. We adapt, we find solutions, and we work together." As the first light of Zithuria's second day touched the floating gardens, Lysara felt a new understanding of her husband. She had thought he was a humble, ordinary man, a visitor from a distant planet with little to offer beyond charm and politeness. But now she saw that his humility was a shield, hiding a mind capable of extraordinary strategy, compassion, and courage. He was not just human, he was a force that could shape events, inspire loyalty, and protect a civilization in ways she had never imagined. For the first time, she wondered what else he might be capable of. The Chthons were only the beginning. If this was his way of acting during a small crisis, what would happen when the full threat arrived? What could humanity achieve when fully unleashed in a universe that underestimated them? Ethan turned to her, noticing her gaze. "You worry too much," he said gently. "We can handle what comes step by step. That is all we ever do." That calmness, she realized, was not simple courage. It was human strength, something alien minds struggled to understand. And she, the queen of one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, had married a man whose potential far exceeded her imagination. As the city settled into a cautious quiet, Lysara and Ethan walked through the palace gardens. The air was filled with the soft hum of energy fields and the gentle glow of alien flora. The night was peaceful, but both of them knew it would not last. The Chthons would return, stronger and more determined. Yet, for the first time, Lysara did not feel fear. She felt awe. She felt trust. And she felt a stirring curiosity to see exactly what this human, her husband, could do when the universe tested him further. The night ended with a quiet promise. Humanity had arrived on Zithuria not as a visitor, but as a force capable of shaping events, challenging expectations, and standing boldly against the unknown. And Queen Lysara, who had once thought she knew the man she married, now understood that she had only glimpsed the beginning of his true power. The morning sky over Zithuria was streaked with crimson and violet as twin suns rose slowly above the floating cities. The calm that had followed the initial Chthon probe was gone. Reports poured in from the outer sectors. Multiple Chthon ships were approaching, larger than before, their shadows stretching across the atmosphere like dark specters. Queen Lysara moved through the palace corridors with quiet urgency, her multiple limbs flowing in practiced elegance. This was no minor incursion. It was a prelude to a full-scale assault. Ethan Cole stood before the central holographic map, analyzing the enemy fleet as it appeared on the sensors. His human fingers traced lines through the projections, marking probable attack vectors and weak points. Around him, Zithurian advisors whispered and debated, their voices tinged with anxiety. Yet Ethan remained calm, a pillar of composure amid the rising tension. "The Chthons are methodical," he said quietly, his voice steady. "They believe their numbers guarantee victory, but they lack imagination. They will follow patterns because that is what their culture rewards. We can use that against them." He assessed every possible scenario, anticipated mistakes, and prepared for outcomes that others could not foresee. In that moment, she realized again just how extraordinary he truly was. Ethan moved quickly to implement his plan. The city's defenses were already strong, but he added layers that no Zithurian alone would have considered. Evacuation protocols were reinforced with subtle guidance, energy fields were rerouted to create defensive choke points, and auxiliary power systems were primed to respond automatically. He instructed the citizens calmly, organizing them into groups and assigning tasks based on their skills. Every action seemed simple, but the combined effect was brilliant. Lysara followed him as he moved to the lower terraces, where factories and workshops had been converted into strategic points. Humans often relied on improvisation, and Ethan encouraged it, blending human ingenuity with Zithurian technology. Workers quickly adapted to his instructions, creating devices and defenses that were unconventional but highly effective. Barricades were reinforced with energy-resistant alloys. Emergency transport drones were repurposed for evacuation, and even floating gardens were rigged as impromptu shields for key buildings. As the first wave of Krithan fighters entered Zethuria's upper atmosphere, the sky erupted in flashes of light. The alien ships were sleek, moving with terrifying speed, their weapons capable of immense destruction. Panic could have spread easily among the citizens, but Ethan had already prepared for that. He directed civilians to safe zones and communicated instructions in ways that reassured them without causing chaos. Lysara watched him orchestrate the city's defense with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Where she would have commanded from a position of authority, issuing orders and expecting obedience, Ethan moved among the people, inspiring confidence through calm reasoning. His instructions were simple yet precise, and they worked. In the city's lower sectors, small groups of citizens had been tasked with operating defensive drones and managing energy shields. Many of them were inexperienced, unsure of how to respond under pressure. Ethan knelt among them, explaining how to adjust shields dynamically and use drones to mislead enemy sensors. He encouraged them to think creatively, to adapt to unexpected circumstances. In a few moments, what seemed like chaos transformed into coordinated action. The Krithans launched their first assault on a residential sector. Energy blasts tore through the air, and explosions sent shards of floating glass and metal into the streets. Lysara's heart pounded, but Ethan remained focused. He guided local defenders to redirect shields, deploy emergency barriers, and lead civilians to safety. His mind worked faster than anyone else could follow, calculating probabilities, predicting enemy movements, and adjusting the city's response in real time. Small victories began to appear almost immediately. A seemingly isolated building, targeted by multiple Krithan fighters, was saved by a simple redirection of energy fields. A bridge used for civilian evacuation was stabilized by a quick adjustment of its support beams. Everywhere Ethan moved, his presence turned potential disaster into controlled outcomes. Lysara began to understand that humans had a quality aliens often underestimated: adaptability. Whereas Zethurian defenses relied on precise calculations and established protocols, humans could improvise, invent, and act unpredictably under pressure. Ethan embodied this trait fully. His calmness, intelligence, and courage allowed him to see solutions that were invisible to others. Hours passed as the Krithans pressed their attack. The enemy fleet was relentless, yet the city's defenses held. Ethan coordinated Zethurian ships in ways their own commanders would not have attempted. He combined human intuition with alien technology, creating maneuvers that confused the enemy and protected vital areas of the city. His decisions saved countless lives, from soldiers on the front lines to civilians hiding in upper terraces. Lysara could not tear her eyes away from him. She had thought she knew the man she had married, the humble diplomat who seemed ordinary in every way. Yet now she saw the truth. Ethan was extraordinary. He was human, yes, but he possessed a rare combination of calmness, intellect, and courage that allowed him to act decisively when faced with overwhelming odds. He was not reckless. He was precise, strategic, and inspiring. By the evening, the Krithans had suffered significant losses and were forced to retreat temporarily. Zethuria's floating cities bore some scars, but the casualties were far fewer than anyone had expected. Citizens cheered quietly from safe zones, unaware of just how close they had come to catastrophe. Lysara approached Ethan as he reviewed the battlefield on the holographic map. "You've done more than I imagined," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and admiration. "The city, the people, they survived because of you. That is what humans do. We adapt, we find solutions, and we work together." The night settled over Zethuria and the city slowly returned to normal. Fires were extinguished, debris cleared, and energy fields stabilized. Citizens moved cautiously, still aware of the threat but reassured by the effectiveness of the defense. Lysara and Ethan walked together along the palace terraces, the city glowing softly beneath them. "You handled everything so calmly," she said. "I thought humans were fragile, easily overwhelmed by danger, but you are different." Humans were often underestimated by alien species, but she had seen firsthand the truth. A human could be small, unassuming, even humble, yet possess the ability to shape events, protect civilizations, and inspire others to act beyond their limits. Ethan had shown her that. As the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the floating gardens, Lysara realized that her understanding of her husband, and of humanity itself, was changing. She had married a man she thought was humble and ordinary, but now she knew he was extraordinary, capable of facing overwhelming threats with intelligence, courage, and quiet leadership. Ethan looked out at the horizon, his expression calm. "The Chthons will return," he said. "They always do, but we will be ready." And she, the queen of Zithuria, had married a man whose strength was not just physical or political, but something deeper, a combination of heart, mind, and spirit that could change the course of events in ways she had never imagined. The night deepened, and the city settled into cautious calm, but Lysara knew that the true test was yet to come. The Chthons would return, stronger and more determined than ever, and when they did, she would see the full measure of Ethan's abilities, not as a diplomat, not as a husband, but as a human being capable of extraordinary courage and ingenuity. For the first time, she understood that the man she had married was not simply a human visitor from a distant planet. He was a representative of his species' greatest qualities: adaptability, ingenuity, courage, and humility. And Zithuria, a world of advanced technology and intelligence, would soon see just how powerful those qualities could be when fully unleashed. Lysara and Ethan stood together on the palace terrace, watching the stars and the approaching shadows of distant Chthon ships. The night was quiet, but the tension remained, a reminder that the galaxy was filled with challenges beyond imagining. Yet in that quiet moment the queen felt a deep and unwavering trust. She knew that humanity, embodied in the man at her side, would face whatever came with bravery, intelligence, and heart. The night passed slowly, and when dawn arrived it brought with it new challenges. Reports indicated that the Chthons were organizing a larger fleet, intending to strike Zithuria in full force. Lysara felt the weight of responsibility as a queen, but she no longer doubted the outcome. With Ethan's guidance, with humanity's insight and courage, her people would endure. And she, who had once thought she knew her husband completely, realized that she had only just begun to understand the full extent of his extraordinary abilities. The morning sky over Zithuria burned with a sharp orange hue as the twin suns rose, signaling the start of a day unlike any other. The floating cities hovered silently, but beneath their calm surface, tension crackled like static. The Chthons, a relentless and cunning alien species, had returned with a fleet far larger than before. Reports from the outer sectors indicated dozens of massive ships, armed with advanced weapons designed to tear through energy shields and crush cities with ease. Queen Lysara stood on the palace balcony, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her heart was heavy, yet she felt a strange sense of calm. She knew that the man at her side, her human husband, was capable of far more than she had imagined. Ethan Cole studied the holographic map in the strategy chamber, his fingers tracing the enemy fleet's movements with deliberate precision. The room was filled with Zithurian generals, their multi-limbed forms tense and anxious. They had fought many battles, yet even they seemed unsure in the face of the Chthons' overwhelming numbers. Ethan, however, remained calm, his mind moving through possibilities, contingencies, and strategies like a well-oiled machine. "The Chthons rely on power and intimidation," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "They underestimate creativity, unpredictability, and the ability to adapt. That is where we have the advantage. We will not fight them like they expect. We will make them fight the wrong battle." He saw patterns in chaos and found opportunities where others saw danger. It was a human skill, alien in its unpredictability, and it was about to be Zithuria's greatest weapon. The city moved with quiet precision. Citizens were guided into safe zones, energy shields were strengthened along critical points, and defensive drones were positioned in innovative formations. Ethan personally visited several sectors, adjusting defenses on the fly, explaining strategies to groups of Zithurians and humans alike. Workers, soldiers, and civilians responded with efficiency, inspired by his calm confidence and subtle leadership. By mid-morning, the Krithan fleet had entered Zithuria's orbit. Shadows from their massive ships stretched across the floating cities, creating an eerie darkness beneath the twin suns' glow. The first volleys of energy blasts tore through the upper atmosphere, shaking the floating platforms and sending shards of crystal and metal scattering through the air. Panic could have erupted, but Ethan's presence steadied everyone. He moved swiftly, giving precise instructions, redirecting shields and coordinating defensive fire. Lysara watched him from the balcony, a mixture of awe and disbelief coursing through her. She had thought she understood the man she married, but now she realized she had only glimpsed his true nature. He was not merely intelligent or brave. He was a force capable of thinking, acting, and inspiring others in ways that transcended human limits. He was quiet, unassuming, and humble, yet his mind worked with the precision of the most advanced artificial intelligence. In the lower sectors, where civilian populations were dense, Ethan orchestrated improvised defenses. Energy barriers were reinforced using unorthodox methods. Floating gardens were transformed into shields for key infrastructure, and factories were converted into rapid supply centers for emergency equipment. Zithurian engineers followed his instructions, their disbelief turning into admiration as his suggestions proved immediately effective. The first Krithan strike targeted the city's central energy hub, hoping to destabilize the floating platforms. Energy fields flickered dangerously, threatening to collapse entire sections of the city. Ethan moved among the defense crews, calmly assessing the damage and issuing instructions. Small adjustments to field harmonics, rerouting power through secondary conduits, and clever positioning of energy-absorbing barriers stabilized the hub. What could have been a catastrophe was averted, almost seamlessly. Lysara felt a surge of pride. She had seen many capable leaders, human and alien alike, but none had operated with such clarity, courage, and ingenuity under pressure. Ethan was not only saving lives, he was shaping the battle, turning the Krithan's strength into weakness. As the day wore on, the battle intensified. The Krithan's adapted, changing their attack patterns, attempting to overwhelm the city with sheer force. Zithurian ships engaged them in direct combat, but losses mounted. Yet each time the Krithan's tried to exploit a weakness, Ethan was already several steps ahead. He had anticipated their maneuvers, set traps, and created decoy positions that lured enemy forces into predictable paths. One particularly dangerous Krithan cruiser targeted a residential sector where thousands of civilians were still being evacuated. Ethan analyzed the cruiser's trajectory and noticed a slight delay in its firing pattern, a minor flaw in its automated targeting system. He quickly coordinated a countermeasure. Small, rapid deployment drones were sent to intercept the blasts, while civilians were rerouted through hidden paths he had discovered during his previous tour of the city. The result was astonishing. The cruiser's attack failed, and the civilians reached safety without a scratch. Lysara could hardly believe what she was witnessing. The man she had married, whom she had once thought ordinary, was displaying a level of tactical genius that surpassed even her most advanced generals. Yet he did not seek recognition. He moved among the people, adjusting defenses, inspiring confidence, and saving lives with a quiet humility that made his brilliance all the more remarkable. By afternoon, the Krithan's realized they had underestimated Zithuria. Their attacks were becoming less coordinated, more desperate. Ethan capitalized on this, directing Zithurian forces in ways that confused and frustrated the enemy. He combined human intuition with alien technology, creating innovative maneuvers that turned the tide of skirmishes across the city. Ships were lured into ambushes, energy blasts were reflected using carefully aligned shields, and drones executed flanking maneuvers that Zethurian commanders had never attempted before. Lysara observed the city's defenders, who were now moving with newfound confidence. Soldiers, engineers, and civilians alike had become extensions of Ethan's strategy, their actions synchronized by his guidance. It was a spectacle of coordination and creativity, a demonstration of humanity's ability to inspire and organize even in the most dire circumstances. As the Crithan fleet began to falter, Ethan turned his attention to the city's highest towers, where energy control centers were under threat. A group of elite Crithan fighters had broken through the outer defenses, aiming to disable key systems. Ethan led a small team of defenders, moving with precision and purpose. Using a combination of Zethurian technology and human improvisation, they neutralized the threat before significant damage could occur. Explosions shook the towers, but careful planning and quick thinking minimized casualties. Lysara felt a deep sense of admiration. She had married a man who could remain calm in chaos, think several steps ahead, and act decisively when the stakes were highest. She realized that his humility was not a lack of confidence, but a conscious choice to let actions speak louder than words. Ethan's brilliance was not about personal glory. It was about protecting others, saving lives, and turning impossible situations into opportunities. By evening, the Crythans had lost a significant portion of their fleet. Many ships were destroyed or disabled, while others retreated to regroup. Zethuria had survived the first major battle largely intact, with fewer casualties than expected. Citizens emerged cautiously, their awe and gratitude directed at Ethan, even if they did not fully understand the depth of his planning and action. Lysara approached him on the balcony, her multiple eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and wonder. "You've done more than anyone could have imagined," she said. "The city, the people, they owe their lives to you. Courage is contagious and so is calmness. We survive together." As the twin suns set, casting long shadows across the floating gardens, Lysara realized that her understanding of humanity and of her husband had changed forever. She had thought Ethan was a humble, ordinary man. Now she knew he was extraordinary, capable of facing overwhelming threats with brilliance, courage, and humility. The night was calm, but the tension remained. Reports indicated that the Crythans were regrouping for an even larger attack. Lysara felt the weight of her responsibility as queen, yet she no longer doubted the outcome. With Ethan's guidance, humanity's ingenuity, and the loyalty of her people, Zethuria would endure. As they stood together on the balcony, watching the stars and the distant shadows of the retreating Crythan fleet, Lysara understood something profound. The man she had married was not just a human visitor from a distant world. He was a symbol of his species' greatest strengths: courage, creativity, adaptability, and humility. And Zethuria, a world of advanced technology and intelligence, had just witnessed the full force of what humanity could achieve when tested to the limits. Lysara turned to Ethan, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. "The Crythans will return. We will face them together, and we will prevail." She knew that when the next battle came, humanity, embodied in Ethan, would be a force that even the most formidable adversaries could not ignore. For the first time, the Queen felt a deep and unwavering certainty. Zethuria's future was secure, not just because of advanced technology or careful planning, but because of the ingenuity, courage, and resilience of the human at her side. Ethan's presence had changed everything. His quiet leadership, humility, and brilliance had turned what seemed like inevitable defeat into victory. And as the twin suns finally disappeared beneath the horizon, Lysara realized the truth she could no longer ignore. She had married a man who was not only extraordinary but capable of shaping the fate of worlds. Humanity, she understood, was not to be underestimated, and she, the Queen of Zithuria, would stand beside it as an ally, witness, and partner in the trials yet to come. The horizon of Zithuria was painted in pale gold as the twin suns rose, casting long shadows over the floating cities. The calm of the previous day was gone, replaced by an uneasy tension that gripped every citizen. The Chthons had returned, their fleet larger and more organized than ever. Reports from the outer sectors indicated dozens of massive warships moving with terrifying precision, each bristling with weapons designed to pierce the strongest energy shields. Queen Lysara stood on the palace balcony, her multiple limbs steady but alert. Her gaze swept over the city she had sworn to protect, and for the first time she felt no fear. She had seen her human husband act, and she knew that humanity had arrived, not as a visitor but as a force capable of defending worlds. Ethan Cole stood beside her, his posture relaxed yet alert. His eyes scanned the horizon, analyzing enemy positions, flight patterns, and probable strategies. Around them, the city buzzed with coordinated activity. Energy shields hummed, defensive drones moved into position, and citizens carried out evacuation and emergency protocols with quiet efficiency. All of it was guided by Ethan, who had already anticipated the movements of both defenders and invaders. "The Chthons have learned from their last attack," he said calmly. "They will try new tactics, but they still underestimate unpredictability and adaptability. We can turn that against them. They will fight the wrong battle if we act correctly." His calmness was not passive. It was active intelligence, a steady mind capable of turning chaos into opportunity. She had watched him before, but today, the full measure of his brilliance would be revealed. As the first Chthon ships entered Zithuria's orbit, the battle began in earnest. Shadows of the massive cruisers stretched across the floating platforms, and energy blasts tore through the sky. The city's shields flared and shimmered, absorbing the first volleys of attacks. Panic could have spread among civilians, but Ethan's guidance kept everyone focused and confident. He moved quickly, issuing precise instructions to defense crews, drones, and military units. His orders were simple, yet they coordinated the actions of thousands of people and machines with perfect timing. Lysara followed him through the command center, observing the interplay of human ingenuity and Zithurian technology. Ethan had anticipated the Chthons' standard attack patterns and had prepared countermeasures that exploited their predictable behavior. Drones were deployed in flanking maneuvers, energy shields were dynamically adjusted, and decoy signals were used to mislead enemy targeting systems. Each action seemed small, but together they formed a web of defenses that the Chthons could not easily penetrate. The first wave of enemy ships targeted the central energy hub, aiming to destabilize the floating cities. Energy fields flickered and sparks flew, but Ethan remained calm. He moved among the defense crews, making rapid adjustments to power conduits, rerouting energy flows, and stabilizing the hub in ways that no Zithurian engineer had considered. The hub survived, almost unscathed, and the citizens who had been preparing for evacuation continued their work with confidence. Lysara felt a surge of admiration. She had thought she knew her husband, but she realized she had only seen a fraction of his true capabilities. His intelligence, creativity, and courage were extraordinary, but what struck her most was his humility. He did not act for glory or recognition. He acted because it was necessary. He inspired others not by commanding them, but by guiding them, showing them what was possible, and letting them take part in their own triumphs. The Chthons pressed harder, deploying larger ships and faster attack squads. They targeted critical areas of the city, attempting to overwhelm the defenses with brute force. Yet every time they struck, Ethan was ready. He anticipated their movements, guided Zithurian ships into strategic positions, and directed civilians and soldiers with precision. Energy blasts were reflected, shields reinforced, and enemy ships funneled into traps where their firepower became ineffective. In the lower sectors, where civilian populations were dense, Ethan's human ingenuity shone. He repurposed ordinary objects and technology to create unexpected defenses. Floating gardens became barriers, supply drones were converted into mobile energy shields, and workshops produced improvised devices that disrupted enemy sensors. Zithurian engineers and soldiers followed his guidance, their initial skepticism replaced by admiration as his unconventional tactics consistently succeeded. Lysara could hardly believe what she was witnessing. The man she had married, the quiet human she had once thought unremarkable, was orchestrating a city-wide defense against an alien armada with brilliance and courage that rivaled the greatest generals of Zithuria. Yet he remained humble, focusing on results rather than praise. By midday, the tide of battle began to shift. The Chthons, frustrated by their inability to break the city's defenses, began making mistakes. Ethan exploited each error, directing attacks against isolated ships, setting traps in the asteroid belts surrounding the city, and coordinating defensive maneuvers that confused and demoralized the enemy. Zithurian ships, guided by his insights, struck with precision, turning what could have been chaotic skirmishes into organized counterattacks. Lysara watched as the enemy fleet faltered. Ships that had once moved with intimidating power now struggled to maintain formation, falling prey to traps that were clever, unexpected, and utterly human in their design. Ethan's calmness, creativity, and ability to inspire others had turned the battle into a test of wit and adaptability, qualities the Chthons had overlooked entirely. As the day progressed, Ethan led a small strike team to intercept the Chthon flagship, which had been coordinating the attack. Using a combination of Zithurian technology and human improvisation, they navigated through enemy defenses, avoided detection, and struck with precision. The flagship's critical systems were disabled, causing confusion and disorder throughout the enemy fleet. It was a turning point, a moment where human ingenuity directly altered the course of a galactic battle. Lysara felt her respect and admiration for Ethan deepen. She had married a man she thought humble, quiet, and ordinary. Now she saw that he was extraordinary in every sense. His calm intelligence, his courage under pressure, and his ability to adapt to impossible situations had saved thousands of lives and turned the tide of battle. He was a symbol of what humanity could achieve, a species underestimated by many, yet capable of brilliance beyond imagination. As evening fell, the Chthon fleet began a full retreat. Zithuria's floating cities bore some scars, but the casualties were minimal compared to what could have been. Citizens emerged from safe zones, cheering quietly for their survival. Soldiers and engineers looked to Ethan with gratitude, even if they did not fully understand the depth of his planning and action. He had not only defended the city, he had inspired it. Lysara approached him on the balcony, her multiple eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and awe. "You've done more than anyone could have imagined," she said softly. "The city, the people, they survived because of you." Yet here was a man whose courage, intelligence, and adaptability had saved an entire civilization. His humility made his achievements even more remarkable. He had not acted for glory, he had acted because it was necessary. He had turned potential chaos into order and fear into confidence. As night fell, the city settled into cautious calm. Fires were extinguished, debris cleared, and energy shields stabilized. Citizens moved quietly, aware of danger but confident in their survival. Lysara looked at her husband and felt a deep sense of trust and admiration. She realized that the man she had married was not just extraordinary, he was capable of shaping the fate of worlds. The twin suns had set, but their faint afterglow illuminated the floating gardens, casting a serene light over the city. Lysara stood with Ethan, their fingers brushing gently. She realized that the Chthons were defeated not by sheer power, but by ingenuity, courage, and adaptability, the human qualities embodied in the man at her side. "You've changed everything," she said quietly, her voice filled with conviction. "I thought I knew you. I thought humans were fragile, but now I see humanity is extraordinary. That is enough to face challenges, even ones as great as this." In the days that followed, the city began to rebuild. Zithurians marveled at the human ways of problem-solving, improvisation, and courage that Ethan had demonstrated. Diplomatic emissaries from neighboring systems visited, eager to learn from the human who had saved a civilization. Lysara recognized that this was not merely a victory over the Chthons, it was a revelation. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy not as a minor species, but as a force of innovation, courage, and hope. Lysara and Ethan walked together through the restored gardens, the air filled with the soft hum of energy fields and the glow of alien flora. "You've shown me what humans can do," she said softly. "I always admired your humility, but now I understand that it was never weakness. It was a strength." She had married a man she once thought ordinary, and she had discovered that he was extraordinary beyond measure. Humanity was not to be underestimated, and she would stand beside it as an ally, partner, and witness to its potential. The Chthons were defeated for now, but the galaxy was vast, filled with threats and challenges yet unseen. Lysara knew that with Ethan by her side, and with the human spirit guiding them, Zithuria and its people would survive, thrive, and face whatever came next with courage and ingenuity. The night ended with quiet peace, but both the queen and her husband understood that this was only the beginning. Humanity had shown its strength, and Zithuria had witnessed the full measure of what one man, one human, could achieve. The universe would remember, and Lysara would never see humanity the same way again. She turned to Ethan, her voice firm and full of awe. "You are not just my husband. You are a force that the galaxy will never forget. But together humans can do anything. We survive, we adapt, we inspire, and we face challenges head-on no matter how impossible they seem." As the stars sparkled above Zithuria's floating cities, Lysara realized that she had married more than a man. She had married a symbol of human potential, a quiet force capable of changing the fate of civilizations, and she would stand beside him, witnessing, supporting, and learning from the extraordinary abilities of the species she had once underestimated. The night was calm, but the future was bright. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again.